Max Verstappen reckons he's only part of F1's three-way title showdown because of McLaren's failures, and there's a painful number of lost points for Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris to support Verstappen's claim he'd have been world champion long ago driving their car. Norris holds a 12-point lead over Verstappen with just the Abu Dhabi season finale to go, while Piastri is a further 4 points adrift. What has been a two-horse race between the McLaren drivers for so much of this season has been blown wide open by Verstappen's dogged resilience, Red Bull's revival in the final third of this championship, and, as Max points out, a ton of errors from his opposition. At the last race in Qatar, Verstappen threw a sharp jab McLaren's way when he said he'd have won the title a long time ago if he'd been driving that car. Amusingly, that came before McLaren chucked away a deserved win for Piastri in the Grand Prix, left Norris down in fourth and opened the door for Verstappen to be a genuine threat in Abu Dhabi this weekend. Whether you believe Verstappen or how soon you think he could have been champion this year in either Norris or Piastri's position probably depends on what rules you apply to his hypothetical scenario. What's most interesting about Verstappen's comments, though, is how they shine a harsh light on McLaren's wastefulness in 2025. As Verstappen is right, he really shouldn't be in the picture. We've gone through each driver's season, looked at their errors and the various other factors that have gone against them, and worked out what's really been thrown away. No driver ever has a perfect season, so getting jumped off the line or losing a place into the first corner is, loosely, just the kind of thing that can happen in racing. So we're not counting a couple of cases where a McLaren driver could or should have just been on pole position and won a race, although, as we'll come to later on, that does factor into judging the job Verstappen himself has done by comparison. We're looking for errors that move the needle, team screw-ups, or big swings in race circumstances that were out of a driver's control. And across the whole season, by our subjective measure, Piastri's lost out most. If his lost points were a driver, they'd be 8th in the World Championship. We reckon there are 87 points legitimately on the table, fairly evenly split between Piastri's errors and things outside of his control. The biggest individual loss is in Australia, when he went off on slicks in the rain, an understandable mistake in terrible conditions, but a mistake nonetheless. He's also had 3 wins turn into second places, at Silverstone due to a harsh penalty for his driving at the safety car restart, in Hungary when McLaren let Norris switch to what was unexpectedly the race-winning strategy, and of course with McLaren's bungling of the safety car pit stop window in Qatar. Throw in Piastri's error-strewn Azerbaijan weekend, sprint race crashes in the US and Brazil, the widely derided penalty he got in the Grand Prix in Brazil, and his Vegas disqualification, and a shocking number of drop points has tallied up in the final third of the season. That's before even factoring in small losses like being pushed out the way by Norris in Singapore and having to give back a position to Norris in Italy, which Piastri thought was completely unfair, so we'll add that to his tally too. Norris isn't far off either. His big miss was the engine shutdown at Zandvoort that cost him second place, and he lost the same position again in Las Vegas. That's half the 72 points we've counted in our tally right there. His most costly mistakes were at the start of the season, qualifying and then racing poorly in the China sprint, crashing in Saudi Arabia qualifying and driving into Piastri in Canada. But he also had a rubbish Baku weekend and was taken out in Piastri's Austin sprint race shunt too. Norris did lose out with the safety car call in Qatar, but it's worth noting he could have still finished third, so those 3 points are actually on him. We make that a fairly conservative 47 points lost that Piastri is responsible for, and 37 unjustly lost in other situations, with Norris costing himself at least 29 points and 43 more going begging on top. In the context of Verstappen's "I'd have won the title ages ago" claim, these lost points and the fact that certain scenarios also gave other championship protagonists more points are obviously significant in the championship remaining undecided for so long and Verstappen being able to claw his way back into contention.
Today's video is brought to you by Rovo, your AI teammate from Atlassian. Rovo connects knowledge, people and workflows so teams can work smarter and move faster. It helps people find answers, make decisions and automate work securely and with context through search, chat, agents and studio. Rovo runs on the Teamwork Graph, Atlassian's intelligent layer that unifies data across all of your first and third-party apps so no knowledge gets left behind, and so you always get personalised AI insights from day one. And the best news? It's already built into Jira, Confluence and Jira Service Management paid subscriptions, so the power of Rovo is already at your fingertips. Know the feeling when AI turns from tool to teammate. If you Rovo, you know. Discover Rovo, AI that knows your business, powered by Atlassian. Get started at ROV, as in victory, o.com today.
How you imagine the alternative scenario is important. Give Verstappen the McLaren in a Red Bull team context, no teammate to speak of, and his team operating solely with his championship bid in mind, and he would probably have charged to a 5th title. But it would be unfair to just assume he'd have had, say, as crushing a year as 2023, and that Norris or Piastri couldn't have had some of the success Verstappen had in the Red Bull RB21. Norris has shown the best of himself many times this season, especially as he points out during a very important last month or two, when he needed to save his faltering championship bid. As for Piastri, this is obviously his best year in F1, and his progression in only his 3rd season has been immense. Given a race-winning car, which the Red Bull was, not just because it had Verstappen driving, he'd have still won races. Plus, Verstappen's not perfect. He's dropped meaningful points 4 times this year, twice because of his own errors. In Spain, he lost his head after being told by Red Bull to let George Russell by, and admits now that his biggest mistake of the year was not controlling his reaction better. Driving into Russell, whether by design or just by needlessly aggressively and carelessly trying to push him wide with an immediate repass, was just daft. Verstappen also had a spin at the safety car restart in the wet at Silverstone, which ultimately prevented a podium there. The likelihood of some Verstappen mistakes continuing, even in a better car, is enough to stop him just cantering to a 2023-esque title, given there would be greater opposition this time, and this 2025 McLaren has vices that even Max would struggle with from time to time. Then there's the much more interesting scenario to consider. What if Verstappen was in a McLaren but facing the same circumstances as Norris or Piastri, as in fighting his teammate for the championship? You can't create a hypothetical scenario like Max has without inviting further imagination. If Verstappen was in the same team and with the same car as Norris and Piastri, you would probably still back him to win overall, but it would be a surprise if Verstappen completely walked over them. Norris's problem is his consistency. He's made errors at crucial moments, especially when under pressure from Piastri. Verstappen would have given Norris an even harder time, so the rate of errors might even have increased. As for Piastri, he wilted for a while in a difficult run, something Verstappen would have ruthlessly punished. Ultimately, Verstappen's been the best driver this year, so it's hard to imagine he wouldn't have been world champion with the best car, which the McLaren has been overall, even though at times the Red Bull's been as fast or faster. So, back to Verstappen's original claim. Would he have been so superior either with a McLaren level Red Bull or planted in a McLaren that he'd have won the championship a long time ago? It actually takes a lot to wrap up the title with races to spare. Last year, Verstappen only got it over the line in Las Vegas before the final 2 rounds in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Even in 2023, the year he won 19 of 22 races, Verstappen was only champion with 5 races left, so you do need an absolutely dominant season, no opposition and no threat at all from your own teammate to get it done super early. It would be uncharitable to say Verstappen would have swept all of the available McLaren wins over either Norris or Piastri, as that detracts from both drivers doing a good job on those weekends. He would probably have taken some more wins though, and some better other results along the way. But Canada, for example, was a legitimate George Russell win, and Russell's other victory in Singapore was another strong Mercedes showing, so it's hard to be definitive in terms of what a Verstappen-driven McLaren might have managed there. Ultimately, McLaren's drivers have still won 14 of the 23 races between them, and Verstappen has 7 of the others, so you can't just assume that Verstappen had loads more victories there for the taking. It could even go the other way. Maybe he wouldn't have won some of the races he did without the Red Bull, especially if another frontrunner was driving it instead. Whichever way you run the simulation though, Verstappen comes out ahead. Norris leads the actual championship over Verstappen by 12 points. But you can add quite a few more points to his Red Bull tally if he has a better car and he vaults clear. Or you look at how many points the McLaren drivers lost and say, well, if Max is there, quite a lot of those points aren't being dropped. If the 2 McLaren drivers were absolutely perfect with everything they controlled, then by our count, they could have scored an extra 76 points between them. Building on Norris's existing lead, that's potentially an 88-point advantage for the perfect McLaren driver with one race still to go. Verstappen probably wouldn't have all of that and might have found other ways to lose points, but he could also have gained a few more points here and there too. Either way, the fact he lets so little slip in his own season is a strong factor in his favour to argue the championship really wouldn't be a live issue anymore. It would probably have been wrapped up in Las Vegas, maybe Brazil, depending on what scenario you're creating and how the other drivers have performed within it. So Verstappen's right, he probably would have had a better season and be world champion already, but he isn't. That's why F1 2025 is still so much fun.